What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Movie Quotes Jones review of Doki Doki Literature Club. Now, as a fan of both horror games and YouTube videos that discuss horror games, it was almost inevitable that Doki Doki Literature Club would eventually appear on my radar. It's a free game developed by Team Salvato and is available for download at the time of this recording. I'll put the link below so you can check it out if you feel like it. After seeing a couple of spoiler-free reviews, I figured, fuck it, got me a copy, and started playing. After completing 3 full playthroughs, resulting in 2 of the 3 possible endings, Doki Doki Literature Club initially affected me in a way that I couldn't fully explain. I still kinda can't, except for to say that I had an almost, cathartic emotional response to it. If you haven't played it yet, I would definitely recommend you give it a try. Again, download link in the description of this video. Stand warned, though. Even if you're a stoic adult like myself, this game could still get to you. It got to me. I also want to say that Doki Doki is not intended for children. If you're a kid and you're watching this, do not play it. Save your childhood innocence and enjoy it while you still have it. Okay, so Doki Doki places you as a high school student who has to choose an after-school program or, club to join and attend. It asks you for your name whenever you start a new game, and the girls in the game refer to you by your name throughout. You walk to school each day with a close childhood friend named Sayori, who just happens to be the vice president of a certain literature club at your school. She kind of twists your arm to join. How could you say no to that cute little face, though? You reluctantly agree, and you eventually find yourself in the club room on the otherwise vacant 3rd floor of your school. There you meet the other girls in the club, Yuri, Natsuki, and Monika. The gameplay is simple enough, man. You play as yourself. All conversation between you and the girls is what drives the game. And it's all red on little dialogue boxes towards the bottom of the screen, and you advance the dialogue by clicking your mouse or by pressing the enter key. And that's pretty much it. Sounds simple, because it is. You eventually become smitten with all 4 of the objectively cute girls, based on these conversations, particularly during the first act of the game. Now, this experience, where you get to know the girls, can take an hour or 2, just depending on how fast you read. I put my glasses on, because, I realized we were going to be doing some reading for a while. But regardless, each girl's personality is meticulously fleshed out. You notice how I'm calling them girls and not characters or NPCs or AI characters or anything else like that? No, girls. This process goes on for a while, and at certain points you are prompted to write these quote-unquote poems simply by selecting words that appeal to the specific girl that you want to get, closer to. The dialogue reveals what the girl's preferences are, and you use context clues from your dialogue to choose these words. The only girl that you cannot cater directly to with your choice of words, with your poetry writing, is Monika, and she is the president of the DDLC, and she's the one who seems to be the most into you at the outset. As simple as this sounds, it's a deep experience, and if you're willing to commit to the gameplay, you really do feel like you have made 3 or 4 new friends who are cute girls who are kind of into you. Depending on the words you choose while writing your poems, one of the 3 girls will pay you a visit over the weekend where you get to spend one-on-one time with them. You get to know them even better during these visits. The first act eventually closes with an unfathomable tragedy. I remember telling you a minute ago that I was wearing my eyeglasses, having spent about 90 minutes or 2 hours reading text on my computer, and I took the glasses off and threw them at my computer screen in reaction to this tragedy that kind of unfolds right in your face. However, the game then simply resets as though nothing even happened, and the second act begins. Oh, the second act. Okay, the second act. Before we discuss the second act, why not have a look at the 4 girls that you spend the first act getting to know? So each girl has a so-called dere type. I learned this after playing through it. I did some reading, And dere types are personality types that appear in manga, in anime, and in video games. Please forgive my complete lack of attempting an authentic pronunciation of these Japanese words, because I'm really, really out of practice. All that said, Sayori is the game's dere. She's bright, optimistic, bubbly, energetic, friendly, and perhaps just a little immature. She's been a close friend and neighbor of yours since you were both kids, and she's a character that you know the best. She's also the only reason that you joined the Doki Doki Literature Club. Sayori has this catchphrase, so to speak, and it looks like this. She displays an authentic level of vulnerability that made me really want to take care of her, and look after her. And almost made me feel bad for pursuing any of the other girls. She also seems to hold the entire club together with her ever-positive attitude and her sincere concern for all the club members' well-being, even going as far as shutting down a couple of potential conflicts. Sayori quickly became my favorite, and I'm pretty sure that was supposed to happen. I'm pretty sure that was by design. You spend the most amount of time each day with Sayori as you walk her to and from school and club meetings, as well as being in the club meetings. So Sayori does these funny, cutesy things, like, for example, she takes a bite out of a classmate's cookie while the classmate is still holding the cookie. And in the first poem that she writes, she ends up putting the line, "I want breakfast," at the bottom. She immediately reveals that she had eggs and toast, which are, of course, delicious. She's the only character that does not visit you if you pursue her with your writing, although you do visit her. Natsuki represents a tsundere. She is outwardly critical and almost hostile towards you and the rest of the literature club, but inside she's actually warm, kind, and caring. She also does deliberately cute things, but hates being called cute. Just look at that. God, alright, we'll stop calling you cute. She is into manga, and she regards it as a legitimate form of literature, but doesn't keep it around her house because her dad would, and I quote directly from the game, beat the shit out of her for doing so. She stashes it in the classroom used for club meetings. I guess the whole hiding your shit underneath your mattress is kind of outdated now. If Natsuki visits you, the two of you spend time baking cupcakes. You see she is quite talented at baking, having made cupcakes for the entire literature club on multiple occasions. Also cookies. Remember I mentioned cookies earlier? Well, Natsuki baked those cookies. She insists that her poems are the best of the bunch, in spite of their sophomoric construction and basic vocabulary. I hate to say something like this, but she's probably the least noteworthy and most innocuous of the girls. Yuri is a dandere. She is quiet, soft-spoken, beautiful, and highly intelligent. She's the most eloquent writer of the group, but is also extremely shy to the point of even being socially awkward. She's also depicted as the most well-developed of the club members. Yes, I mean exactly what you think I mean. Yuri is into surreal literature, to include those pieces of work that build immense worlds that the reader can completely get lost in. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge, not meta. She stands at odds with Natsuki in her writing style and her general personality. You see, Natsuki is extremely extroverted and displays a direct, childish writing style. Yuri, on the other hand, is reserved, usually thinks before she speaks, and writes rather expressively. Lots of florid language in her writing. And she seems to apologize for basically everything she says or does, including for apologizing too much. Surely you've met somebody who does that. At the same time, you're obviously smitten with her appearance, intelligence, and generosity. She's a nice person. She lends you a book at one point in the game. She makes tea for the entire literature club several times. If Yuri visits you, you all spend time making decorations for an upcoming festival at this school. This festival is referenced several times during the game, and the members are interested in doing a presentation at this festival to get new literature club members. This pisses Natsuki off for a reason that I don't remember. Anyhow, because of her fascination, I digress. Because of her fascination with the development of immersive atmosphere and surreal literature, Yuri is also good at creating atmosphere and immersion in the real world. She even extends you the courtesy. Remember I was telling you how nice she was? Well, here's how nice she is. She brings a small pocket knife to use to cut ribbons with for these decorations. She tells you that she has an interest in knives, explaining that she even has a collection that she wants to show you sometime. A knife collection. But spoiler, that never happened. Monika is the president of the Literature Club, and her Darius style is difficult to describe. I actually looked it up and got a few different responses, and the one that I think I'm going to go with for right now is Dandere, similar to Yuri. Monika is the typical, dream girl. Not from the musical Dream Girl, but girl of your dreams. Beautiful, intelligent, sophisticated, kind, athletic, popular. She is confident and mature without being arrogant or outspoken, and that makes it easy to believe that she is the leader of this club. She seems to have a great deal of knowledge about you and about the other club members, and she's the only character really to break the fourth wall during the first act, particularly with her writing tips of the day, where she directly addresses you and gives you hints. Her name is also conspicuously not Japanese, is it? I mean, Monika can be spelled using hiragana. It looks like this. Might even be pronounced Monika in Japanese. Again, I'm sorry if I butchered that. I'm out of practice. Additionally, one meaning of the Japanese word ika is squid, a point that Sayori casually references during a conversation about the festival. However, in most game correspondence that I've seen, her name is displayed in katakana, which looks like this. Katakana is usually reserved for the pronunciation and spelling of sounds and words that are not native to Japanese. My surname, Jones, for example, would be spelled using katakana, while Sayori's would use hiragana, or kanji. The Japanese have 3 written languages. 3! I digress. Monika is also the face of the game. It is her character that greets you on the download website and encourages you to download the game and asks you to spend the most amount of time with her. She has private off-screen conversations with Yuri and Sayori. In spite of this presence, she is the only character who you do not get one-on-one time with in the first act, although it does happen eventually. You're the protagonist. If you need to know anything more about the protagonist, just look in the mirror, or have a look at your Facebook page. Okay, before we get to the second act and an absolute shit ton of spoilers, let's discuss why this game was so effective, and why it, unlike so many other pieces of media, elicited a strong and genuine emotional response from me, which, make no mistake, it did. Doki Doki Literature Club's script is very, very detailed. Each girl's physical presence, mannerisms, styles of speech, facial expressions, physical gestures, and vocabulary make them stand out as interesting and unique individuals. The dialogue really does resemble a well-crafted novel, but unlike in a paper book, here you get to actually interact with them on a personal level. The girls' dialogue does not come across as superficial fluff bullshit. They all seem genuine and relatable. They seem like real people. Every word in the dialogue and every word in the poetry is perfectly placed. Ever heard about how every single word in a short story must have meaning? Ever heard of Chekhov's gun? Well, the dialogue in this game checks both boxes. It is perfect. The girls have different interests. Most of them are framed, of course, in the concept of discussing literature. It's a literature club. Yuri likes horror and the surreal. Sayori likes pretty much anything cutesy. Natsuki likes anime, and Monika, I'm not sure. Still, not sure. These interests provide you with clues as how to compose your poems. I think I mentioned that earlier. The girls' poems provide an additional level of depth to their characters, while also foreshadowing events that will occur later in the game. Yuri's poems tend to be pretty meta, and they offer you brief, subtle glimpses at the game's second act. Most of Monika's dialogue directed at you also provides some level of foreshadowing. Both of these meta elements are really obvious during a second playthrough, but not during a first playthrough. Have you ever seen The Usual Suspects? Well, it was like that. Doki Doki Literature Club's plot is linear. The game's climactic events are the same no matter what decisions you make, and no matter what girls you attempt to get to know. Some paths are more direct to the ending than others. For example, attempting to form a relationship with Natsuki during the second act results in longer gameplay, but you always arrive at the third act by the same overarching route. These branches to the plot, as well as the hints provided in the poems and in most of Monika's dialogue, make the game fairly replayable if you have what it takes. Doki Doki has 3 possible outcomes for its brief 4th act. A bad ending, right? A good ending, and the so-called preemptive ending. That's from Wikipedia. I have experienced the bad and good endings and didn't bother with the preemptive one. And after having looked it up, I'm glad. No matter what 4th act you get, the end credits will finally roll. Monika will sing you a song. The ending determines the song's effect on you, and my experiences went like this. The bad ending. I was left confused, as it was very clear that I had done something wrong or left something out. As a matter of fact, this might really be my only complaint about the game. After replaying it a couple times and getting the bad ending, I actually had to look up how to get the good ending. And getting the good ending is kind of a chore, but it's worth it. The good ending. When I completed the good ending and the credits rolled and Monika began singing, I was left emotionally crippled. And I was kind of a mess for days after the fact. Not kidding, days. Days, dudes. The endearing ending is especially effective after what the 2nd act does to you, what it puts you through. So that's my spoiler-free portion of the review. If you've not played it, stop watching this video now, download it, and give it a playthrough. Leave comments, let me know what you think about it. For those of you who have played it and want to see my review of the 2nd act, a spoiler alert is now in effect because I'm going to talk about the 2nd act. Okay, that should be enough time. Hopefully you've bailed if you are going to download the game and play it. Quick disclaimer, getting into the 2nd act, and unlike every other disclaimer I've ever issued, this is not a joke. The second act has some pretty messed up shit in it, and it gets fairly deep and fairly disturbing. So if you are sensitive to really disturbing stuff, you should probably bail. Here we go. This is where shit starts to get real. The 2nd act is why Doki Doki Literature Club is on anybody's radar. It gets really, 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 fucking really real. Let's have another quick look at Sayori. So, towards the end of the 1st act, you visit her at her house. During this visit, Sayori reveals that she suffers from depression and that in the recent past, her depression has been ramping up. On Monday morning, she doesn't show up for your walk to school. Monika hands you this poem, which prompts you to sprint home or sprint over to her house and check on her. She's dead. She had committed suicide by hanging at some point over the weekend. This occurs no matter what decisions that you make throughout the game. I tried and tried. There is no way to save her. You just can't. I'm not going to put the image up. It's too depressing to look at, so I'm just going to let it go. After you find her and you have a few scenes of lamentation and mourning, the game promptly resets for Act 2. But Sayori is no longer there. It's like she didn't exist to begin with. She's even removed from the title screen. This leaves you to interact with Monika, Natsuki, and Yuri. You again read and click your way through the game, and you again exchange poems with the girls. However, without Sayori around to hold the club together, everything slowly starts to fall apart. The cracks begin to show. Yuri and Natsuki end up at each other's throats a couple of times, even cussing each other out. And if you decide to pursue Natsuki, she becomes passively aggressively hostile towards Yuri, calls her a sick freak. Throughout the game, it's strongly implied that Natsuki is neglected and possibly physically abused by her father, but this is never really substantiated, it's just kind of hinted at. I also have a fan theory that Natsuki is into Yuri. I honestly thought that was going to eventually become a thing, but it's never really fleshed out. It's also just, I guess it's just my theory, and that's that. It's not a theory, it's a hypothesis. Natsuki does not cause you or herself or anyone else harm at any point. Like I said, she was innocuous. But there is one kind of weird moment with her that makes for pretty good nightmare fuel. She's the only girl in the game that comes out more or less unscathed, and she's also easily the voice of reason in this game. Now, do you want to know who is not reasonable and who is harmful and scary? Fucking Yuri, man. God. Pardon my candor here, but have you ever heard the phrase, "don't stick your dick in crazy"? Well, that phrase is for people like Yuri. I described her earlier as a dandere. Well, guess what? She's actually a yandere. Yanderes are like danderes. I hope I don't have to say either of those words again. Only they become like legitimately obsessed and may even commit violent and or disturbing acts as a result of this obsession. It is important to understand that Yuri's evolution into a yandere is very gradual. For probably 60% of the second act, you all get pretty close. With Sayorigon, she seems to be the girl that the game kind of pushes you towards. You spend a significant amount of time reading a book with her in close physical proximity. You share snacks, you share tea, you admire her physical beauty and her sensitive and considerate nature. However, things do fall apart, slowly at first, but steadily and with a growing intensity. If you pursue Netsuki at all, Yuri becomes extremely jealous and possessive of you. And she becomes creepier, and scarier as the act progresses. Towards the end, she even becomes scary to look at. Jesus, just look at those eyes. Then there's the whole cutting thing. Remember I mentioned that she had a collection of knives, even bringing one to cut ribbon with? Well, that's not the only thing that she likes to cut. She also cuts herself. This is implied in the first act, but shoved right in your fucking face in the second act. It's hard to watch. She begins to really break psychologically, saying and doing some crazy, irrational shit, like committing self-harm at school while retrieving water for a tea kettle, hurting Natsuki's feelings so badly that she runs out of the room in tears, stealing a pen from you and masturbating with the pen, attempting to paper cut herself on a poem of yours, and handing you this poem, which she has actually endowed with her scent. Directly from the game, people, not my prose. I'm not completely sure what endowed with her scent exactly means, aside from obviously bleeding on it, but I'll bet that she rubbed it... never mind. This poem, this scary looking thing, can be decoded because of the script that it's written in, and let me tell you what, it's fucked. I listened to it once and that was enough. If you want to check it out, there's a link in the description where it's narrated. Netsuki begins to catch on to Yuri's gradual mental deterioration, and her final poem is actually a heartfelt letter that she wrote directly to you, a plea for you to help Yuri at all costs. She passes the note to you disguised as a poem because she doesn't want Monika to see her imploring you for assistance. After you read Netsuki's sincere, heartfelt note, she immediately backtracks and says that you should spend all of your time with Monika. Just Monika. You are given a choice of sorts of which girl you'd like to spend some time with to prepare for the school festival, and you are basically forced to choose Monika. If you try and choose Yuri or Natsuki, your cursor is forcibly shoved over Monika's name. This only causes more dissent among the three girls. Yuri finally breaks completely, becomes exasperated, and desperately confesses her obsession to you. She asks for you to, quote, be her lover, and you are prompted to make a yes or no decision. By this point, I was practically shaking in my chair. I chose yes because I was afraid of what would happen if I said no. No matter what decision you make, Yuri promptly produces a large knife and stabs herself in the abdomen and chest repeatedly before collapsing. This takes place on a Friday. It is not discovered until Monday. That's right, you spend 3 days with dead Yuri in the club room. Thankfully it's not in real time, but it takes a while. On Monday morning, Natsuki is the first person to come to the club room. She discovers you and Yuri's now decomposing fucking body, freaks out, pukes, and runs out of there. She leaves you with the only remaining character, Monika. Let's discuss Monika, yeah? Monika, as it turns out, is the game's main antagonist. She's a supervillain, no kidding. It's revealed that she has achieved sentience. She's like Skynet. She became self-aware and went on a destructive path. Earlier I mentioned that Monika had off-screen conversations with Sayori and Yuri. Notice what happened to both of these girls? That's because Monika was in the background pulling the strings. She was manipulating them, purposely exaggerating their negative traits. She even goes as far as to manipulate the code of the game itself, causing broken gameplay in several instances, forcing you to restart the game a couple times. You see, Monika is also in love with you, but she's a sentient, maleficent program within the game itself. I guess she's like an agent in the Matrix? She tweaked up Sayori's depression and Yuri's obsession to 11, driving them both to commit suicide. I think it's fair to say, then, that she murdered both of these girls in an attempt to have you to herself. And by you, I mean you, not your character avatar. She addresses you by name. You end up in this, weird void thing with her, where she explains everything. Her sentience, her dissatisfaction with being but a program within a program, her love for you, and her plan to destroy the other girls. This is the brief third act. She deletes Yuri and Natsuki's character files from the game's code in real time. She strongly implies that you should delete her character file as well. Doing so brings on the fourth act of the game. If you simply delete Monika and restart the game, you get the so-called bad ending. Each time at restarting the game from this point reveals that the game is hopelessly broken and must be reinstalled to be played again. According to Monika, the Literature Club is too sad of a place and she simply will not restore it. Getting the good ending is something of a project. I mentioned this earlier. You have to visit Sayori, but then you have to quit and restart the game before her suicide is revealed. Then you have to have your visits with Yuri and Natsuki, restarting each time in the scene before Sayori's death. If you do this and delay deleting Monika for several moments after you are prompted to, you get the good ending. When the game restarts, Sayori assumes the role of club president, and Monika is now absent from the game entirely. She informs you that she now has all the knowledge that Monika did. After all, she is the club president, right? Bids you a tearful and sincere farewell, and invites you to come back and visit anytime. Monika still sings you her song, but the credits now contain endearing pictures of the girls. It is absolutely gut-wrenching, especially after all that the second act puts you through, and it was this ending that had me messed up for days after the fact. That's it. Bye.